Hi everyone! There are thousands of tips out there on how to save money. From shopping at cheaper supermarkets to my own videos on how to save money on phones, there are many ways you can spend less on things. Once you save a little money, eventually you may want to spend it on a house or a big trip or another big thing. But what do you do while you save up? Do you put it in your savings account? Do you invest in shares or cryptocurrency? Stash it in a paper bag at the back of your freezer? In this video, I'll look at the options for you and give you some recommendations. This should apply no matter what country you live in. Let's get into it. There are 4 basic categories for where to keep your money. There's the category that economists call cash, which includes notes and coins and money in bank accounts that you use for everyday expenses. There are income or defensive investments, which include savings accounts and term deposits. There's growth investments, which will probably have the highest growth over time, including superannuation, shares, ETFs, managed funds, and property. And lastly, there are speculative investments. These include things like Bitcoin, foreign currency like Japanese yen, precious metals like gold, collectibles like Pokemon cards and old albums and comics, and art. This speculative investment category, you could make potentially the most money from there, but you need to be an expert and be able to see the future to know what is going to work. This is the most like gambling. To give you a bit more of an idea, here's a table I put together. First, a bank transaction account is an account that you use for everyday transactions, like going to the shops or buying things online, and you'll have a card connected to that account. A savings account, though, has a small amount of interest that will be added to your total amount every month or so, depending on how much you have in there. Typically, it doesn't have a card attached to it, but you would have it with the same bank. Then there's a term deposit, which is when you put your money away with a bank for a set period of time, and when it matures or reaches its end, you get the money back with interest. Most banks have these too. In growth, we've got super, which I mentioned in a previous video, shares and ETFs and managed funds, which are all kind of similar, and I'll explain in a future video, and property, or buying houses or land for businesses. You can see that the risk is low to the left here in this table, but it increases as you go to the right. Similarly though, the usual return is low to the left and is higher in growth investments. I recommend having money in a spread of these things, from cash through to growth. You can have some money in speculative investments too, as I do, but don't go crazy and put all your money in there. I actually have a couple of $1,000s in some cryptocurrency, and though it rose quite a lot at first a few years ago, it's been pretty unstable since a couple of years ago, and I can't recommend it as a good idea unless to speculate and treat it as gambling or for a little bit of fun, knowing that you may lose it. How much you should have of each depends on when you need your money, and that depends on where you are in life. There's one thing I need to say about all of this with this handy graph from the government's Money Smart page. A mantra is only invest what you are prepared to lose in growth assets, as though they will probably increase in value, they may lose in value as well if your risk is not managed, which we'll look at later. The only properly safe assets in the short term are the defensive ones, which is not to say you should never invest in growth assets. You absolutely should at some stages in your life, but because the value may dip in the short term, it's better to keep money here only if you're not going to use it within 5 years. So, knowing that you need to have some money for expenses in transaction accounts, and you can have any amount from zero to whatever you're prepared to lose in speculative investments, where do you put the other amount you're saving or investing? For most of this, let's say you are still living with your parents. Hello to my high school students. First, one great thing about this stage of life is that probably all of your income, whether it's from a job or from your parents, is disposable. This means that you don't need to use it to pay bills, buy essential items, etc. So you could do what most people do and blow it all on gadgets and food and going out, and that would be great. But if you find that you want to start putting some money aside, here's what I would do. First, think about what you want to save for and how far away that is. And I recommend you think about what you want, because it will help you to save towards that goal and not just frivolously spend the money. If you have it in your mind, you'll be able to think about it more when you save that money. Typical things that you might want to save for are moving out of home or buying your first car, traveling, or even saving up for your deposit for your first home. Any of these may cost from, say, $3,000 to $10,000, maybe less or more. So what you should do is try to see how much you can save each pay cycle and see how long it will take to save up for these. For example, say you want to buy a second-hand car for about $5,000 and you're saving $300 each pay cycle or fortnight after spending a bit on going out and seeing your friends. Please note, I'm not trying to say you should be saving this much, it's just a scenario with pretty aggressive savings from working a fair bit. You may be saving far less or far more. If you do follow this example, you should be able to get that much in 17 fortnights, or about 8 months. Or if you instead save $200 per fortnight rather than $300, it will take you 25 fortnights, basically a year. So where should you put this money while you save it? If you keep it in your transaction account, or cash, it may be really easy to spend it. So instead, keep it in a savings account. Try not to touch it and watch it grow over time. If you get a bonus cash injection, like a gift from someone or a tax return, you can spend it straight away, or even better, put it towards the same fund and bring the date of purchase earlier. I also mentioned term deposits earlier. Now, sometimes the interest rate is higher than a savings account, so if you want to put your money in here, you won't be able to touch it without paying fees, but you can earn more interest potentially. When I was saving a number of years ago, the interest rates on term deposits were better than the savings rates. But now in April 2022, they're very low, near 0%. So I wouldn't even bother looking unless you're watching this at least a year or so in the future from now. So instead of putting money into a term deposit, it would be better to have it in a savings account for now. Lastly, do you remember I talked about growth assets? Well, if you do want to put away some money into things that are more than 5 years away, I really suggest that you put money into a growth asset like shares. But remember that it's more risky and within 5 years you may lose money. The reason it's shorter over 5 years is that most shares or property portfolios do eventually bounce back after a crash and increase over the 5 years, even after the biggest crashes. You will get more out of this category in the long term over 5 years, usually 6 to 10% per year, but be careful in the short term. So just before we wrap up, if we are at a different stage of life than living with parents, then still the same ideas apply. If you need money in the short term, keep it in something more stable, a defensive asset such as a savings account, but otherwise invest in a growth asset like shares. Also in the future, I will go into how to invest in the shares and growth assets. It is easier than ever before. So, you've saved your money now and put it into a good place, and after a period of time, hopefully you'll be able to take it out and put it in your transaction account and then book those flights, or buy the car, or put down a deposit for a house, or whatever else. But by doing it in a smart way, you should be reaching that goal quicker and enjoying the benefits that good money management can bring you. Hopefully this was useful, and if so, do the thumbs and the comment and subscribe, and check out my other videos. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you next time. Bye!